G'day crew, Todd from Toxic Garage Customs. Glad you could join me. In this video we're back on the Datsun 1000. In the previous video we gave it a bit of a polish up, see how it would come up. We haven't finished that and we'll get back to that in the future. But in this video and the three after it, we play around with getting the motor running. The all-powerful 1000cc Datsun motor. In this particular video, we play around, we put a battery in it, and we have a look at the ignition, the points and the condenser, and we play around with that. It's a little bit of a tutorial, this video, and so is the series on this motor. So if that interests you, then please follow along. And I'll see you at the end of the video, see what you reckon. See you then. Bye. Second things first, if you've been watching, you know that I've been moving, and you've probably seen some pretty darn exciting videos of me loading and unloading stuff. Well, this is the remnants of my garage at the moment, my workshop. I've left some stuff behind so that I can work, but generally speaking, it looks like a barren, boring, domestic, residential garage. Not that beautiful workshop that I'm used to seeing. There is, however, a new acquisition. There'll be two of them soon. So, this is what I'm left to work with. So, luckily, I left old red behind. So, we're going to be using some things out of this and some stuff from there to try and get that Datsun running. Let's have a look what we can do. First, we're going to try and clean the points. We'll take the plugs out. Probably going to chance it with the oil that's in it, and I'll see as far as the fuel pump goes. That car's been sitting for nearly 25 years, so the petrol's probably like it was from day one, because the fuel of old is not the, by comparison, rubbish that we've got today, in my opinion. The stuff today just goes off. The old stuff, you can get it, you can use it. So hopefully it's a good batch of old fuel. We'll see. If not, then I'll just jerry rig it, connect a tin up underneath the bonnet and get it running. It's a small issue. We've got a fuel drum. What else do you know, really? Okay, so get some tools, go up there, start tinkering. Oh, and shh, my wife Davina, Queen D, can't call her that. Princess D. Whatever. Davina. D is away for a couple of days. So what we're going to do is steal the battery out of Audrey, because the battery in the Datsun is 20 something years old, and unlike the petrol, I'm pretty sure the battery is not going to be usable. So we'll steal the battery out of Audrey. It's probably not going to fit because it's a tiny little engine bay in that Datsun, but we will use it to wind it over. Let's go. Nothing's getting done while I'm standing there looking at you. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at our ignition points, which are down here. We're going to check to see if they're burnt or if they're clean, and if they look good enough, then we'll check the gap on them, and if they look like they need a clean, then I'll get a points file and I'll just give them a clean up. So a points file is just a tiny little file, and its purpose is specifically to file between the two contacts on the point, so I'll show you that. We're also going to take the spark plugs out. It's a 4-cylinder, there's only 4 of them there, they're easy to get to. Good thing about these old cars, and I'll apologise, there's cars and buses and planes and everything going on today here. Good thing about these old cars is that they have ignition points, they have spark plugs, and they have a carburetor. And there's really not much more to them. Modern cars, or any car with fuel injection or with electronic ignition, okay, people can work on them, but they're more complicated. There's more moving parts involved in them, or maybe not as many moving parts, but there's more parts involved. There's more technology involved in them. Good thing about these old cars is with the simplest of tools, and I've got to say that I'm working on a skeleton staff of tools at the moment, as I mentioned earlier. So if you didn't have a points file, for example, then as the owner of this car has done, and if we look over here, there is a piece of wet and dry just tucked in behind the coil, and I can guarantee you that this piece of wet and dry sandpaper was used to clean up the points, maybe even the spark plugs and any of the contacts. So we'll have a look at that. Doesn't need to get any fancier than that, but I do happen to have something a little fancier than that. Okay, so the distributor cap, it's got two little clips on it. You take that off and the cap comes off. Then we have, so this is the distributor cap just here. We have 4 contact points, and each one of those goes to a spark plug lead, and each spark plug lead goes to a spark plug. And what happens is that this thing, which is in the middle of the distributor and just easily slips out, the rotor button, and this only goes on one way. It's keyed to only go on one way on the shaft, and I'll show you a bit of a close-up of that in a moment. So this spins around, and what happens is this point here contacts each one of those little terminals inside the distributor cap, and when it does, it sends spark, or it sends power out towards the spark plug to create spark. This part here contacts on the little block in the middle, this one where my thumb is, and it's on a little spring. So what happens is that the rotor button sits in there and it spins around like such, and that end there contacts onto those terminals just there and sends power out there. But the power comes in through here, contacts the top of this, then travels across there, and then gets distributed out to the spark plug leads. This is a distributor, and this is the distributor cap, and this is the rotor button as it rotates. So what actually happens, and I'm not going to go into the full ins and outs of how it works because it is a little more complicated than I want to get into right now, but simply what happens is that you have these things here, the ignition points, and the ignition points open and close. So that part there opens and closes. It's on a little spring just here, and what happens is the center shaft of the distributor has lugs. If it's a 4-cylinder, it'll have 4 little lugs, so 4 little bits that stick out further, and when it rotates around, it makes the points open and close. Each time it opens, it's creating a little more resistance in the electrical circuit, and as it builds resistance, it creates a spark, and that spark is distributed to the spark plugs. So I'm just going to, by hand, turn the engine over, going to hold the belt and turn the fan, and I know that this turns. It'd be easy without the plugs in it, but I know it turns pretty easily. And what we should see, if there is a gap set on the points that is at all, then when one of those little lugs, one of these points here, there's 4 of them on opposing corners, when we turn the engine, we'll see that that will turn. So number one, we know that our distributor is turning, and you may or may not have seen just then that the point's open. So I'll go backwards and forwards and try and zoom in so that you can see what's actually happening there. Points closing, and if I go back the other way, you can see them opening. So that's the first thing you want. If they don't open, then they won't create resistance, and if they don't create resistance, they won't spark. So that gap can be adjusted and needs to be adjusted accurately. But the first thing you need to see when you're checking this is, does the distributor turn? Yes, it does. It goes into the engine, the distributor. It's got a gear on the bottom, and when the engine turns, that gear usually drives off the camshaft and or the oil pump or both, and then it rotates that cam around in the distributor. That cam opens and closes the points. The points create resistance. They send the spark out through the rotor button, this guy, which pops on only in one direction. Great video.
let's zoom out for a second. There's a little lug just there. I've just got to line that up there. Okay, so it only goes on in one place. So it's locked in. So if I turn the motor, and you can see the rotor button turning. Probably going backwards at the moment, but doesn't matter. So you can see it turning, and as I said, each time it turns, the button touches one of these 4 terminals and sends the spark through the leads to the spark plugs. So the first thing I'm checking there is, does it turn? Yes, it does. That's a good start. It means the distributor is doing its purpose, its job of turning. It's going to turn the rotor button. Are the points opening and closing? Yes, they are. All of these components can get worn and sometimes need replacing. So the ignition points, this is the ignition points here, this whole lot just here, it's all a replaceable item. They're about $15 maybe. And also there's a component called the condenser, which is just down here behind the distributor. In this case, sometimes they're in the distributor. This little thing here is called a condenser. It's a replaceable as well. Usually if you replace the points, you replace the condenser as well. And the condenser essentially controls the amount of current going through to stop the points getting burnt out. And so that all looks pretty good. So what you might do is clean that up, just generally with maybe a little bit of brake cleaner or just a rag or something. And with the points file, I'm just going to open this up and I can have a look at the surface of the points. So I'm going to try and zoom you in to see how well we can see it. Where are we? Focus. Okay, so what I'm looking at is the actual surface of the points just here. And if they're relatively flat, then they're probably okay. If they're all burnt and chunky, like the surface of the moon, then they might need replacing. But at the very least, we can get our file and pop it in there and quite literally just go backwards and forwards a little bit. And the spring of the points is actually making one side close against the other. So it's giving enough resistance. And all I'm doing is just cleaning it up a little bit. Just cleaning it up a bit. It's a bit hard for you to see, I'll check it out. But those 2 contact points there, just need those to be cleaned so a nice clean spark happens. Every now and then you get to hear a bird in the background. I think it's a Timorese something or other, I can't think what it's called. They come over here every year, lay their babies, kick out a native bird out of its nest, and then do that noise constantly. Forever, because they want to be fed, and they're big black birds, and it might be a tiny little bird trying to feed it because they think it's their baby, but they're actually not. Their baby got pushed to the ground, their egg exploded, and then they got replaced by this big black thing. Anyway, back to the car. So what I've done there, I've just labelled lead number 1. Now this is only a 4-cylinder, it's not hard to work out, and I could go onto Google and work out what the firing order is of this and what the points gap is, so the gap that needs to be in the points, and what the spark plug gap is and so on, which I will look those up. But as far as the actual firing order, rather than look it up, I'll just assume that what's here is right at the moment. So I've marked number 1, and what I've got is that I can see that the leads are already going to the plug. So without boring you with the details, I'm sure you can work it out. I've worked out that the firing order on this car is 1342. So I've just written it on a piece of tape just there, 1342. And how I worked that out is that I just took the rotor button off to see which way it turns. So if I push the engine clockwise, so push the fan down clockwise, then what happens is that when I put the rotor button back on, put the rotor button on, then I'm just going to zoom in here so you can see. When I turn the engine clockwise, you'll see the rotor button will turn anti-clockwise. So what I'm running with is that this engine turns clockwise when it goes over. It might turn anti-clockwise, I don't know, and I don't really care, but normally engines turn clockwise. So it's going anti-clockwise, it's going clockwise. The distributor, or the rotor button, is going anti-clockwise. So what I've done is I just had a look at the distributor cap while it was in place. I worked out which was number 1, which was this one. And then I went anti-clockwise, so that's 1. So this lead here goes to 3. So it's number 3, goes to number 3 spark plug, then the next one goes to number 4, and the one after that goes to number 2. So the firing order is 1, 3, 4, 2. And what that means is number 1 spark plug fires, and then when it's gone through its cycle, number 3 will, and then number 4, then number 2, then back to number 1. And that way, when I put it all back together, put the distributor cap on, put the leads on, put them to the spark plugs, the engine will run in the same order that it's supposed to without me having to do any further research other than just copy what's already there. That is, of course, assuming that what is there is right in the first place, because someone may have changed it. But when I look at it, those leads look like they are in the shape that they have been for quite a while, and I'm going to assume that it's right. If not, Google. Let's take the distributor cap off, let's take the plugs out and check that out. Okay, so I've taken the first 2 plugs out, and I'm leaving them in the order that they're coming out of, so I can just sort of keep an eye on how it looks. So this was plug number 1. It's got a gap, quite sooty, so I would say that it's either running very rich or the engine's worn and oil is going past the oil rings and sooting the plugs up. We will find that out. And bus going past. This is plug number 2. Pretty much looks the same. So far that's telling me either both cylinders are quite worn or it is running rich. So we'll work that out as we go. If it's running rich, then it'll be running rich across the board. Now, you may have seen me swinging off my pretty long ratchet here, trying to get those plugs undone, and they're pretty tight, which so either someone's over tightened them or they've just sat there and they've sort of bound themselves in over the last 25 years. I don't want to go snapping a plug, I don't want to go swinging off them, so I'm just going to get some WD-40 or something similar and spray it in around the plug just to try and let it penetrate for a little while before I go snapping something or damaging something. Just going to spray some Penetron in there. It's like WD-40, but my mate Bone Man, who has featured on previous episodes, gave me some of this. It's good stuff. I really like it. So I'm just going to spray a little bit in around the plug and we'll have a look at something else, maybe change the battery out in the meantime. Don't need to flood it, just enough to get in there. Now I can't remember if I've got my compression tester here still or not, but if I have, we'll give it a bit of a compression test once we get a battery in it and get it winding over. So also, as I've been doing this, because I've been winding it over by hand, I did this when I bought it as well, just made sure the engine wasn't seized, and it seemed to turn over quite well. It turns over easily, which could mean it's got no compression, or it could just mean because it's a 1000cc motor. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the plugs out, we'll put the battery in, and because we've got the ignition disconnected, then it can't start, then we'll wind it over and do a compression test. So we'll have a look at that once we get there. Okay, just off camera there, I've taken the 4th plug out. It was super tight. The 3rd one I was seriously concerned about snapping either the plug or my ratchet, it's that tight. I have got some movement out of it, just a tiny bit, but then I stopped because it feels very grabby. So now that I've got a little bit of movement out, let's put a little bit more lubricant in there. Hopefully get some in there. So I'll keep swinging off it, and one of two things will happen. Either I'll make really interesting video content and I'll snap the spark plug, or it'll come out. Let's see. Drum roll, please. Wish these buses would go away. Movement. Now what I'm going to do is just go backwards a little bit. So it might have some carbon build up. That might just make it come off a little bit. Go back the other way. Oh, this is terribly tight. I'm concerned about stripping the threads out in the head. There could be a big carbon build-up on the base of the spark plug. Could be binding in the threads where the spark plug goes in. And what I don't want to do is damage the threads while I'm trying to get the spark plug out, because that would be annoying. I am going to chuck a little bit more lubricant in there. We're looking good, but I'm not going to get too far ahead of myself. These champion spark plugs back in the day had a bit of a habit of snapping. Now, to give you an idea how tight this is, it's actually really draining my energy trying to get them out. I'm really swinging off this. A little looser now, getting towards the end. Come on, we can get there. Whew. So what I wouldn't want to do is put some sort of mechanical ratchet on there, like some power driven thing. So if I did that, I could probably just destroy everything right from the beginning. Okay. Whew. I'm puffing. Okay, so we've got a bit of soot there, pretty carboned up. I think it was just bound in there, but you know what, it's out. All of the plugs look pretty even. Either the motor's evenly worn, or it was just running too rich. Okay, that's great. So what I'm going to do when the time comes, once I've got the battery on here, I'll wind it over and wind it without any plugs on it, just to try and pump out any little carbon deposits and stuff that might be in there. I haven't got an inspection camera, so I could try and shine a torch down there, but I'm not going to. So let's steal a battery. Just before I do that, you need three things to get a petrol internal combustion engine working: petrol, air, and spark. If you don't have one of those three things, you will not get the thing to run. So petrol in the carburetor, air, you need air to be able to go in. So if you've got a blocked air cleaner, that can stop it. And if you don't have spark, so the distributor needs enough power from the battery, so you need a charged battery to create the spark. The coil is involved in this as well, so you need a good coil. They send spark to the distributor sends spark to the spark plugs. If you've got faulty spark plugs, it might not run. If you have a faulty rotor button, faulty points, faulty condenser, faulty coil, faulty wiring in between, or a flat battery, all of those things can and probably will stop the car from starting. So
as far as the fuel goes, fuel needs to go into the carburetor. Fuel goes into the engine. It will possibly run, possibly start. The carburetor has adjustments. If it doesn't send the right amount of fuel there, it might not run properly, it might not run at all, but it's as long as it's getting fuel there, you should have a pretty good start. As far as the air cleaner goes, if you just take the air cleaner off, then it'll get air in there, so quite often you can run it without the air cleaner. Some cars won't run properly with the air cleaner off. They suck too much air in, they need a little bit of a restriction there, and they're tuned that way. So we'll have a look at the air cleaner element. In fact, let's do it now to see how dirty it is. Four spark plugs, got them mixed up now, but they're all pretty much the same, black and sooty. Spark plugs have a particular gap they need, so it varies, but it's normally something like about 0.75 to 0.8 millimeters or something like that. You can measure that with a feeler gauge. Okay, let's have a look. Not horrible, like not very usable really. It's it certainly needs a replacement, but it's not like it's got dead moths and country road dust in it, but it does need replacing. And below here is our carburetor. There's a little bracket holding this plate on, but below there is our carburetor. Let's steal the battery. Okay, there's literally birds everywhere, right? Okay, so what you do need to make sure is that you connect the negative to the negative and the positive to the positive. If you don't know, don't remember, easy way to work it out. The negative, number one on the battery, it's a little minus sign, and the positive is a plus sign. So plus sign just there, negative sign just there. So the negative, this wire here will just go to something like the engine block. So it literally is just going across over to here, and there is a bolt that is bolting it straight to the engine block. Not to anything else, just literally the engine block. There was this other wire here. It was running through just randomly. Presumably it broke at some point. It's just running across to the engine bay, to the firewall. It's just earth. So all of the metal components are just joined together to create an earth that's consistent. And then on the other side, this part here is feeding the starter motor, it's feeding the coil, it's feeding the ignition system. So that's the active side. Earth, positive or active side. Okay, we have a battery connected. What I can check now is, do things like the ignition lights work, or the dash lights work, do the headlights work, all that sort of stuff. And of course, I want to try and wind it over. But now that I've got the battery connected, if I turn the ignition on, I should also be able to open and close the points and see if there's spark. So, okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly did. I'm pretty happy with the progress we're making as well. So the next video that you're going to see will be out very shortly. We're going to have a look at the starter motor, and we'll see what we need to do there. So jump on the next video when it comes out, won't be too long, and follow along. See you then. Thanks for watching.